Welcome to the Trust Factor Radio, bringing you interviews and insights to unlock the power of the subconscious mind to create authority, credibility, and trust. With your host, the Authority Architect, and best-selling author, Neil Howe.
Hello and welcome to the show. This is your host, Neil Howe, and today my special guest is Laura Kendrick, and she helps people going through a divorce or custody dispute to achieve their goals and get results so that they can move forward in a way that's beneficial to them. Laura is an 8th generation of attorneys in her family, and she graduated with a degree in behavioral psychology from Western Michigan University with a double major in political science, and she got her law degree from the University of Denver. Laura Kendrick, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Neil. I appreciate you having me.
Well, this is the thing about attorneys. They're so well educated. You definitely have to do a lot of study to get all those degrees. And there's a lot of reading in the law degree, isn't there?
There's a lot of reading. That's why I've got a new pair of glasses about every year or so. But absolutely, there's a lot of reading.
Great. Well, give us a little bit of your background and the 8th generation of attorneys in your family. Congratulations for that. I guess this was what you were born to do.
I guess so. Yeah, my family, I'm originally from Michigan, hence the Western Michigan University degree. And my family's from Saginaw, Michigan, and we've had a law firm there, I think, since somewhere around 1870. So I pretty much... every human being I met that was maybe 40 or older when I was a kid was a lawyer, and didn't really want to live in Michigan. So once I got out of there and went to law school out here, I decided to start things out here, but still have the law firm back home. It is the largest law firm north of Detroit and east of Grand Rapids, Michigan. So it's a source of great pride for myself and my family, but I decided to kind of keep my roots here and start something new here. So, just a lot of family tradition and a lot of history for me, which is very important in my practice and why I maintain such a high level of integrity. And, it's just a great source of pride for me.
So when we're talking about families, families are extremely important. I think the better the family bond, the more successful the family is going to be. And I know divorce causes a lot of emotions and struggle throughout the United States. So what was it that made you want to become a divorce attorney?
I don't think it was any one thing in particular. I started working for a sole practitioner when I was about halfway through law school, and he did a lot of different things, but one of them was divorce. And, to me, I liked the sort of start and finish of it. I liked being able to take something from start to finish. And so really it almost had nothing to do with the emotional or sort of family aspect of it at first. And then once I got into it, I started to realize that it was, something that could be extraordinarily fulfilling. You get to really get to know folks on a detailed level. You get to know every aspect of their finances. That's really the first thing you do. You get to know your client on an emotional level with their spouse, with their children. So I think, after just looking at it from a very pragmatic perspective and understanding that it was a process that I liked being able to take something from start to finish. Then came kind of the other pieces of it, which was the emotional aspect and getting to sort of build a deeper bond with someone on such really fundamental levels of how they live their lives. That ended up being very fulfilling. So once I realized you could sort of have it all as a divorce attorney and be able to really understand people and really get to bond with human beings and make friends at the same time too, and be able to help people, that's what ultimately made me say, okay, this is really something I'd like to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's definitely a much needed service. There's all different kinds of divorces, from amicable and agreeable to, high conflict and contested that go all the way to trial. Which kind of divorce is it that you deal mainly with?
Well, The folks that can work things out on their own don't generally need my help, but every now and then, I have individuals who just say, hey, I've got a lot of assets and debts and we're really not, I've got some kids, we're really not at odds with one another, but I want to make sure to do this the correct way. And so, I do that a lot. But most of my cases are pretty high conflict. Either parties with some custody disputes or parties with a lot of assets and they don't understand how to, split them up, or they're not in agreement how to split them up. So, we try to settle everything. That's the goal with every single case. You don't want to take a case to trial. That's, it's not something that guarantees a result by any stretch of the imagination, and it's expensive for everyone. And it doesn't provide most parties with a lot of peace of mind, and it's also an incredibly lengthy process. So, when folks come to me, it's always with the mind of trying to settle, but they're coming to me because they have high conflict issues and they need those resolved. So that is generally what I do most of the time.
So what are the real issues, if you can kind of walk us through them? I know just separating causes, hundreds of issues, I'm sure, but what are the main things that each party is looking to get solved?
Well, the main one is property division. Most people come to me and they've got a house, they've got some retirement, they've got some bank accounts, they've got probably a little bit of credit card debt. That needs to be split in an equitable capacity. And a lot of times, bank accounts might be easy to split. Retirement accounts or pensions are a little bit more complicated. Certainly folks that are in the military have some complicated issues as well. So property division is a main one. I would say the next is probably maintenance, or what's commonly referred to as alimony. Individuals want to understand how much are they going to receive if they're not the higher earning spouse, or how much are they going to pay if they are the higher earning spouse, and what's fair and for how long. Those are main issues associated with the financial aspect of things. And then otherwise, the large issue is, of course, the children. What's best for the kids, what's reasonable for the kids, what are issues that are big issues to families, what are issues that are smaller issues, how do we sort out those issues? Do we get an independent evaluation to see if that's helpful in giving folks clarity on how to move forward, and what sort of parenting time and decision making that they should be allocated? So the main three things are property division, maintenance, and then of course the children.
Well, let's kind of walk through each one of those. As far as the property division, what things do we need to consider there? How is it generally allocated?
Well, it depends on how long you've been married. If you were married fairly young, generally everything that you've accumulated thereafter is going to be marital. So a lot of times we're dividing things 50-50. If you got married a little bit later on in life, chances are folks have some assets, maybe some retirement, maybe a house, things like that before they got married, which is going to be separate property. Although the appreciation in any of those balances is going to be marital. So, a lot of it is really just understanding what is equitable. Are you going to give somebody a little bit more? Let's say you've been married for a long time, but you've got maybe similar incomes. Do you give somebody just a little bit more property to offset a slight disparity in income, or do you end up paying maintenance? The two are pretty intertwined with one another. But, if you've been married forever and you got married pretty young, we're going to be doing things 50-50. And, really it depends on the party's goals. A lot of times, you've got someone who hasn't earned, maybe they stayed home and raised a family, but for whatever reason, they don't have the capacity to really accumulate retirement. So they may say, well, hey, in this property division, it's fine and dandy if we do everything equal, but I've got a bank account with cash in it, and then he or she has a retirement account. I'm never going to be able to make up that retirement, so I want more retirement than cash. Or maybe you've got the opposite scenario where you've got someone who says, look, I don't even have the ability to accumulate or save for a down payment on a house. And if you give me more retirement, I'm just going to have to withdraw it and pay taxes and penalties if I want to buy a home. So maybe that person wants more cash. And so you're trying to strike a balance between, let's really talk about first what's on the table, what's marital, what's separate. And then when we look at what's marital, what are your long-term goals? Do you want a house? Do you need a house? Do you want to downsize? Do you have children that are 16, 17 and leaving soon and you don't see yourself staying in a large house for very long? Do you need retirement or do you need cash or do you need a healthy mix of both? So really, my goal is to divide things based on my client's goals and how do you want to move forward, and I help them identify those goals and then really make proposals that can reach those, and for both parties, because you can't reach a compromise by sending someone an offer that doesn't even come close to reaching the other party's goals. So you try to strike that balance so that you can put someone in a position to really move forward the way that they see their lives moving forward.
Yeah, and every case is going to be different based on the goals and the assets and the children and everything in each circumstance. But you mentioned the marital state and then the single state. Is that contingent on having a prenup, or is that something that the court just looks at now and said, okay, well, this is how you came into the marriage and we're going to go from there?
Well, it's not contingent on a prenuptial agreement. A prenuptial agreement is going to circumvent the law. This prenuptial agreement essentially says, I know the law is X, but instead of doing X, we're going to do Y. So a prenuptial is a whole different animal. But when you're looking at a marital estate, you are identifying right from the outset what is marital and what is separate. And so separate property is property that you had before the marriage. Property you got by gift, it's property you received by inheritance. There are some statutorily property that's kind of broken off at the beginning that you shave right off the top. So if you got an inheritance during the marriage and you kept that separate from your spouse, that's going to be your separate property to the extent that the original inheritance, let's say you get $200,000 and now it's worth $300,000, that $200,000 is going to be your separate property. The $100,000 appreciation is going to be marital. So every time a court looks at a case, they're identifying what is marital and what is separate. And so that's really the first thing that a judge would do is say, okay, what do we really have here to divide? You had this before the marriage. You got this by a gift. That was inherited. Let's shave all of this off the top. And then here's what we're left with. And then how are we going to equitably divide what we're left with? Now, that being said, if you got $1 million inheritance and then you kept that separate and that's your separate property, and then the remainder you have left to divide is $200,000, the court can't divide that $1 million, but they're certainly going to take it into account when they go to divide the remaining $200,000. So it's all sort of intertwined, but it's something that the court initially looks at is what is separate and what is marital, and then let's go from there and work from that point. But it does not depend on a prenuptial agreement. A prenuptial agreement essentially changes that analysis, which is the point of the prenuptial.
What is the time frame for, say, you're separating assets? Is there, the properties have to be sold? Is it given a lump sum? And then, I want to get into the alimony and the time after that.
Well, I mean, each case is going to be different. It depends on the level of contention. I mean, if you've got a home that somebody wants to stay in and the other person wants to sell, you're going to take a while to sort that out. It really depends on the other assets. If someone says, well, I've got a retirement account and it's worth about the same as the house is, so we can just, I'll take the retirement, you take the house, and we'll split the rest as 50-50. You don't necessarily have to wait for anything. But if you've got a home and then you don't have enough retirement to go around to make up the value in that home, then you may be looking at selling, which obviously requires, a listing agreement, and you've got to get it on the market, and then you've got to pay some commission. And so that's a longer process. It doesn't necessarily delay the reaching of the agreement. to go ahead and move forward with those types of things. That just generally depends on, how long does that take you to actually agree upon. But logistically, if you're selling a home or if you're splitting a 401k that takes a little bit more documentation, ultimately those issues are going to take a couple more months to sort out.
Mm-hmm. And as far as alimony, if alimony is, judged or agreed upon, how long generally is that term?
The term of alimony is generally around half the duration of the marriage, but it kind of depends on how long you've been married. So here in Colorado, we've got a threshold of 3 years before someone's required to pay maintenance and the other party can receive maintenance. So thereafter, once you get around 10 years or so, we're talking about half the duration of the marriage. Once you get over 20 years, the court can actually award an indefinite term of maintenance. So you could agree to still do it. Let's say you're married 22 years. You could agree to still do that for 11 years. The court could also award it indefinitely and come back in 11 years and look at where everybody's at and look at the situation and see what's best for the parties and what's fair. But generally speaking, we're looking at an alimony term that's around half the duration of your marriage, assuming you're over 3 years.
Well, let's move on to the children, because the children are often affected by a divorce, very emotional time, and depending on the ages of the children as well. What has to come into consideration during that split?
Well, really everything is related to the best interest of the children. And a lot of times you may have two really, really healthy, amazing parents, and maybe somebody travels and you've got some logistical issues with that. But we're looking at the best interest of the children. Where things get a little bit more difficult is when you've got someone who may not be in the healthiest position. Maybe someone has a substance abuse problem. Maybe someone has a new spouse or a new girlfriend or boyfriend who's not getting along with the kids. Maybe circumstances are such that, finances are so tight that someone has to move into a 1-bedroom apartment and they've got 3 children. That's not going to be very comfortable for those children to be living there half the time. So, really it's a lot of logistics if you're not looking at larger issues like substance abuse and the actual mental and emotional stability of someone. But really, we're ultimately circling back around always to what is in the best interest of the children. We want them to spend an equal amount of time with both parents, but that's not always feasible and that's not always best. So, everybody is different. Every family is different. Every child is different. You may have children with special needs. Those are the types of things that you really need to look at from a global perspective and say, now and in the long term, what is best for my children? Do I want to move, closer to their school? Do I need to get a bigger apartment? Do I need to forego having a significant amount of parenting time with my children until I have that bigger apartment? Whatever it is, we try to put the children's best interest in mind and move forward from that standpoint.
Mm. What are some of the myths or misconceptions that people have before entering into a divorce? What preconceived notions are out there that might be wrong?
Well, I think, a preconceived notion is that, a primary breadwinner is going to be hosed in a divorce or something to that effect. And I get a lot of calls from folks that are the primary breadwinner, whether it be male or female, and they're very concerned about, having an unfair result. And so I think that's a bit of a preconceived notion. I don't necessarily think that the law is slated in one direction or the other. I think it can be if you don't have a good enough lawyer to sort that out for you. But I get a lot of calls from very worried folks basically thinking that the divorce is going to ruin them. And, it doesn't need to be that way. The law will provide you an avenue to get an equitable result. You just have to have someone that's going to pursue that avenue and understand that avenue exists. So, I think that's a preconceived notion that a lot of people have, that this is just something that, they're going to have to start from scratch moving forward, and the other party's going to take everything. So, that's a bit of a preconceived notion. I think there's a lot of preconceived notions associated with the children. I think a lot of time fathers think that they're not going to get any time just by virtue of being father and not being mother. Again, I think you've got to have an attorney competent enough to navigate that and understand strengths and weaknesses and where somebody's exposure may lie. But that really, it doesn't matter whether you're father or mother, as long as that's in the best interest of the children. That doesn't need to be a preconceived notion, but I do see that a lot as well. But, I think folks are getting a little bit more educated on the process and are understanding a little bit more, how it can be fair and how they can move forward just by virtue of signing online and taking a look at what Google's got to say. And they come to me a little bit more educated than they did maybe 5-6 years ago. And, but there's a lot of preconceived notions, associated with common law marriage. A lot of people call me thinking that they're common law married and they're not. I know that's not really a divorce issue, but I think that's probably one of the biggest preconceived notions that I have, is that folks think they live with somebody and open up a joint bank account that all of a sudden they're married, and that's just not how it works. So I get quite a few of those phone calls, and got to straighten those out. But folks are getting better at the preconceived notions. I think nowadays they come in with some pretty informed questions, and but the law isn't set up to take one party over the other. It really is, as equitable as they can get it. Flawed it may be, but it is an equitable process. So if you do have someone that navigates that and knows how to navigate that, you're going to get a decent result.
Now, the divorce rate is up around 50%, I believe. But, there's probably a lot of people out there that still have fears about what it would mean to get a divorce. What kind of fears are people dealing with?
Well, I think it's financial in the sense that, am I going to be okay? Am I going to be okay moving forward? Am I going to have enough retirement to retire the way I wanted to and when I wanted to? Am I going to have enough money to live like I used to when I had a 2-income household? I think that's a huge concern for folks, whether they're receiving alimony or paying alimony, whether they're the primary breadwinner or not. They want to make sure that they're okay moving forward. So that's really the biggest concern that I get is someone calling me and saying, am I going to be able to move forward with life and live like I used to? And, then the other issue is the kids. Am I going to be able to spend the time with my kids? If you've got young kiddos, am I going to be able to spend enough time to bond with them? If you've got older kiddos, am I going to be able to spend enough time with them to really be a part of their lives, knowing that they've got friends and extracurricular activities and so on and so forth. But I would think the biggest concern is really just people saying, am I going to be okay financially? Am I going to have a house that's the same or close there to than I was living in before I decided to get a divorce? Am I going to be able to go on vacation? Am I going to be able to contribute to retirement, or am I just going to be in this position where I'm starting over? So I think that's the biggest concern for people.
Well, there's definitely a lot to think about, and it's very apparent that they have to give you all the information. So what does that look like as far as, starting off? They come into your office or for a call, getting the details to see if it's even the case that you're going to take?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is details regarding your finances. What kind of bank accounts do you have? What kind of cash are you holding? What is your income? What is the other party's income? What is your retirement looking like? Do you own your own business where it's a little bit more complicated? We may need to value a business. We may need to take a much closer look at your income because it may not necessarily be commensurate with tax returns. Basically it's getting the full financial perspective, and then it's nailing down, personal issues. If you've got kids, can you be honest about what's going on in your life? And do you have substance abuse issues? Does the other party have substance abuse issues? Is there something that I need to know that's going to change things that the other party absolutely knows? So, we try to talk as freely as possible and make sure that folks are giving me the right amount of information, because if I don't know about it, I can't help. And you can bet that your spouse probably knows about it. So, it's really just making sure to provide a great deal of detailed financial information, and then really talk about your personal life. If you've got kids, what are we looking at? What concerns is the other party going to bring up? Are you guys both super healthy and we just need to find a really good plan for these kids? Or, is something going on with one of you or the other? So it's very important to be honest, but generally those are the things that we talk about in a consultation: is give me the roadmap, the kind of outline of your finances. What are you spending? What's your house look like? How do you earn your money? What do you have in retirement? Same thing for the other party. And then, let's really talk about what's going on in your life as far as the kids are concerned. Personally, do you have issues that are going to be brought up, or are you perfectly healthy?
Now, as far as the finances go for hiring an attorney, I see billboards out there for, $500 all the way up to, I'm sure the complex cases cost a little bit more than that. Do you see the finances being a barrier for people not getting the help that they need?
Yeah, absolutely. Attorneys are expensive, and it's hard to do a divorce really thoroughly for less than maybe $3,500, $5,000. And that's if everything goes swimmingly and you have the least complicated case on the planet. And it's something that, lawyers want to do right. So, when you have an attorney that says, I can do this for $500, that's too good to be true. They're not going to do anything for $500. And they're absolutely not going to do something that's thorough, that you can rely upon, that you've got your T's crossed, you've got your I's dotted. So, it does take a little bit of money, and a lot of people say, well, geez, I'm going through a divorce and I don't even know what my money's going to look like in the future. How can I take $3,500 or $5,000 and rack up more debt? And that's a real concern for a lot of people. And what I generally say to that is, a lot of times you can't afford not to do this, because if you do it wrong or you sign up for something unreasonable, you can't undo that in most situations. So, this isn't whoopsies, I did it the wrong way and I need a second crack at it. 95, 97, 99% of the time, you're not going to get a second crack at it. So, spending that extra money on a credit card, or finding a family member that can help you out, or finding a way to get that done, even when it seems like a large sum of money, can really save you a lot of money in the long term. But it is a real concern for folks out there. Not everybody has an extra $3,500, $5,000, or much more if you've got a complicated dissolution to spend on that kind of a thing. But I think it's worth it in the long run. Of course, I might be a little biased in my opinion on that, but I think that's the biggest barrier. I would imagine that everybody wants to hire somebody to just handle this for them and make sure they're doing it right. The reason they don't is generally because of money.
Yeah, cheap can be expensive, especially in the case of divorce. You definitely want to make sure that you have the outcome that you're looking for. So, Laura, if somebody is looking for a divorce attorney, what kind of things should be they looking for in the actual attorney to make sure that they choose the right one?
Well, I think you got to trust your gut. You have to have a lot of confidence in your attorney, and there's a lot of people out there that, they're going to overpromise and underdeliver. If somebody tells you you're going to get everything you want under the sun, and this is just going to be a great process, and, don't sweat it and don't worry about anything, that is not a lawyer you want to go with. It is a divorce. It isn't, something that's fun. So you are going to have to make compromises, and you're going to have to, cut losses here and there. And so you need someone who's going to be realistic with you and straightforward about, really what are you going to end up with on a realistic perspective? It doesn't help you to get someone who tells you what you want to hear or sugarcoats something or tells you you're going to get something and then doesn't deliver on that. So, be weary of an attorney who tells you you're going to get everything you want. You won't. It's a divorce. It's just, you're cutting things in half. You're not going to get everything you want. You may be able to reach your goals, but that's really, comes with compromise. So, I think you need to look for someone who you feel like in your gut is giving you, an honest assessment of what's going on. I think you also need to find someone that you can talk to. I have a lot of people that say, gosh, my other lawyer was so intimidating or was so hard to reach, or, I met with these individuals and I just didn't feel like I could really talk to them. The more I know, the better I can help you, whether that's about your personal life, whether it's about your financial life, whether it's everything in between. You need to be able to reach me and you need to be able to talk to me and feel comfortable saying, what are your fears about this situation? What do you have out there that you're worried about? And, you've got to be able to have that honest conversation with your attorney. So if you don't feel comfortable talking to your lawyer, that's probably not the lawyer for you. So, look for someone, again, trust your gut. Look for someone that you really feel like, wow, I have some confidence in this individual that they're going to steer me in the right direction, that, they've told me what I need to hear. And I've heard some good things and I've heard some bad things. And I feel like I can talk to this person and I really feel confident in their abilities. The reason you come to lawyers is because you don't know much about the process. And so lawyers are in a unique position to either take advantage of that or really help you out and be a trustworthy individual. And so you need to trust your gut when you're coming to those conclusions. People like to overpromise and underdeliver, and that's not the lawyer you want. So trust your gut, have a lot of confidence and go from there.
Right. Well, Laura, this has been hugely helpful, and I'm sure anybody listening to this is going to want to reach out to you. So tell us a little bit about your firm, what areas that you practice or help people, and how they can best get in touch with you.
So you could probably best get in touch with me on my website, conflictdivorcedenver.com. I'll say that again, conflictdivorcedenver.com. You can reach me there. Really, I do everything under the sun that's domestic relations. I don't do adoptions, so that's probably one of the things I don't do. But if you're going through a divorce, if you've went through a divorce and you've got some issues to clean up, if you've got children with somebody that you've never been married to, if you've got, child support issues, pretty much anything under the sun that you can think of someone going through a family transition, I can help.
And how about the geographic area that you cover? Are you just seeing people in Denver or all of Colorado, or?
It's pretty much all of Colorado, Neil. I do a lot of work in Douglas and Arapahoe counties, Denver, Jefferson County, Weld County, Larimer County, Adams County. Do some things in Mesa, over on the western slope. Pretty much all over in Colorado. I would say my main geographical area is probably the Denver metro area, but I do go all over, and I have represented some folks on the western slope as well.
Well, Laura, this has been very informative. Great information from you. Thank you for spending your time with us here today, and thanks very much for being a guest on the Trust Factor Radio.
Absolutely, Neil. Thanks for having me.
And to our listening audience, if you like what you hear, hit that like button and share, and we'll see you next time on the show.
You've been listening to the Trust Factor Radio with Neil Howe. To learn about the resources mentioned in the show and to listen to past episodes, go to thetrustfactorradio.com. To get a copy of the book, The Trust Factor, go to thetrustfactorbook.com. If you are ready to act now and build your authority, credibility, and trust, schedule a consultation with Neil at theauthorityarchitect.com.